Approve the minutes from the prior meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review those? And are there any changes? Hearing none, I'll look for a motion to approve those meeting minutes as listed. Thank you, Dr. Sugg. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mike. That's good. I did too. The three of us are going to have to stick together tonight. It's just the three of us. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Moving on to random student drug screening. Ms. Morgana.
Sure. This is an opportunity to give you all an update on a policy change we're looking to present to you. Tonight, the purpose is just to give you some basic information and to get feedback from you all, and then possibly move forward at our regular board meeting in a couple weeks. So you should have in front of you a draft policy, plus I think Robin attached that as well. Thank you, Robin. And then tonight I just passed around the committee, so you can see who met and the dates. Here's a few more if anybody else would like a copy. The dates that we met. I thought it was important for you also to see who sat around the table and had the discussions with us, the different times that we met. We met continuously. To be truthfully honest, the notion came about at a coaches meeting that I joined Henderson County High School and their staff right in the summer before school started, maybe that last week of July, and went through some expectations with coaches and sponsors about if you wore the maroon and white jersey or the swimsuit or the uniform, what maroon and white should look like as far as character. And from that, right towards the end, after we talked about expectations, I just said, hey, by the way, how many of you all would support looking at random drug screening for students? And I was surprised at the number who said yes. Matter of fact, nobody said no, but the head nod and the verbal yes. And so from that spawned our first meeting on October 19th, and the people are listed. Now, along the way, there were other people that we invited into the meeting as well, but this was primarily the core. Other folks were the archery coach, bass fishing, other clubs and sponsors along the way, periodically sat in different meetings. So we feel like we well covered our base in getting input and participation. So you also have a policy. This policy is on the front page. If you were to look in our policy book at 9.423, you would see that this is our policy. So what Beth Bird advised us to do is not to create a separate policy, but to embed the student random drug screening right into it. So on page 2 is where it starts to talk about what it is based on, our reason and our rationale. And right underneath that, who would be looking to have student random drug screening, and that would be anybody from grades 6 through 12 choosing to participate in extracurricular activities or applying for a permit to park on school property, or students that will opt in. Parents have a right to request students to opt in to be in the random pool. On page 3 of the policy, this is just a draft policy, there are 4 large statements that we thought were very important that we put right into the policy of what our intent is, why we're doing that. And there's 2 main purposes. One is for the wellness and health of our athletes and the kids that participate. And the second is to act as a preventive piece when students are intrigued, when students want to experiment. It's a good preventive method for kids to say, hey, I can't. I'm in a random pool. So there's 2 large purposes. At the bottom of page 3, it specifically defines what are extracurricular activities, and we listed those specifically. And I'm not reading it to you because I know you all have already had the opportunity to glance through it. On the bottom of page 4, at the bottom of all of the definitions, that's the procedure. That's how would we administer. And we invited Marshall County to come in and talk to us, and Hopkins County superintendent and ADs to come into I don't remember which meeting, November, December meeting, to talk to us about how they implemented procedures and recommendations. And we also looked at policies and procedures from several other school districts. There are 99 school districts in Kentucky that already have student random drug screening. And we decided that the first part of the procedure would be that the consent form would be sent out, and then athletes would have, or students would have 5 days to return it, and that we would start to the first year, we would have to kind of send them out blanket, but then every year after, it was whenever their physical was due. Then when they turn their physical in, that signed form comes in at the same time. And we thought that would be an easier way of tracking. At the top of page 5, it states the number of students that we would request to be screened every week. And again, this number was chosen from looking at what other school districts do. And it was also looking at research shows if you don't at least random screen 15% or more of your population, then why even screen? So we made sure that the number was exceeded the 15%. As you read down through procedures in somewhat of a summary, the request from the committee was to have an outside agency completely do the screening, meaning the outside agency would randomly choose the numbers. The numbers would then be identified with the student name. They would come onto the campus and administer the screenings. They would take the specimen samples and take them back to the lab, make a verification. The agency would contact the parent and the school. And then if there were any type of, discrepancies or questions, they would directly be talking to the lab or a medical reviewer to answer those questions. It would be the school's responsibility to contact the parent the afternoon or immediately after the kids had been screened. On page 6, there is an appeals process listed in the procedure as well. And then at the bottom of page 6 and 7 are the violations. What will happen if we end up with a screen that is positive? The intent of this policy is written to where there are not school consequences for a student who is in the random drug screen pool. There are not school disciplinary consequences. There would be team consequences, which are listed on first offense, second offense, and third offense, or your driving permit would get revoked. But you would not, if you're in this random pool, you would not then have to go to administration and be assigned, 9 weeks probation. You wouldn't be on a contract. You wouldn't be sent to Central. There wouldn't be disciplinary consequences in that fashion. Only first offense, second offense, third offense. And there also is a paragraph in here that talks about self-reporting and to what point can you self-report. The policy reads that the offenses do run, what's the right term, back-to-back, concurrently. I mean, if you're in the 9th grade and you had a first offense, you could have a second offense in your 11th grade year. It's for your whole high school career. But anything that happens in the middle school will not follow you to the high school. So it's in 6th, 7th, and 8th, and then you have a complete fresh start when you start your 9th grade year and go forward. The retesting, if a student is positive, and I think it was Marshall County that told us that they have only had 1 or 2 students test positive since they started to implement this program several years ago. And we would recommend that the outside agency will have to write an RFP. We'll send that out for bid. But whoever we choose to use, that outside agency would come back and do the retesting as well. So it completely keeps it out of our nurses' hands, out of allegations that the school's being biased or not biased, and it's all of the testing would be completed in a laboratory type setting. We had a parent forum. We had both opposition and support there, but predominantly it's been a very supportive process from our kids and from our parents. We have had numerous outside agencies already contact us for wanting our business, but we told them we weren't even close to there, that this committee has put together a draft policy and a recommendation to the board to see what your consideration is. We anticipate it will cost us about $20,000 to on a yearly basis. And I've talked with Cindy, and we feel like we can find money within our budget to place on a line item for random drug screening. That's probably a little excessive, but we also want to include any retestings that we have to do in there. And of course, that can be just adjusted. And it also does depend, the amount does depend on if we use saliva, if we use urine testing, if we have 5-panel, 6-panel, 12-panel, and if we do synthetics. And so we would include all of those pieces in our RFP and then look and determine what we feel like is our best price before we move forward. So I'll open it to any questions. There are several folks sitting around the table that are part of the committee also, and I'm sure they would be happy to answer any questions as well.
Dr. So, you got a question?
The only question I had, and I applaud the work, when I was at the high school, we actually started looking into this with Beth Bird and had her give us some advice on it. I think it's probably long overdue, and I'm glad we're working toward it. The biggest question I had, and you might not be able to answer this until we put out an RFP and get responses back, but what the turnaround time would be. Did you get any feedback from Marshall County or Hopkins County on how quickly they found they could get the results?
Sure. If it depends. You're right. It does depend. Right now, we can do a field test and pretty much have the results immediately. If there was substance in the urine or saliva, then they would send it off for confirmation. From our experience, confirmation can take 5 to 7 days because they send it away. Sometimes I think they come back from Salt Lake City. Sometimes so it could take 5 to 7 days to confirm if it is a positive, but usually 24 to 48 hours, drug companies will tell you, they can tell you if it's a negative screen. But yes, we would want to make sure we include that in the RFP. Right,
Dr. So, we heard from one of the parents at the forum who also worked in I don't remember what capacity, a drug treatment program, and suggested that we, the testing, the swab testing, they said was okay, but sometimes it gave you false negatives, that if you were going to do this at all, you should just do the urine testing and forget it. That was the extra, but she said, don't spend the money on doing the swab because it's going to take a little more time, but they felt those results were better. So that was that parent suggestion to us that night. So, but something to be included in the RFP. So,
the only other comment I would make is that, and I don't get lots of phone calls from my constituents about things unless, they know me and have a feeling they know how I'm going to stand on an issue. But I did get some random calls on this one. And so I'm passing that along, and I do think it's something we need to talk about. The parents or the public that I talked to, because they weren't all parents, were concerned about selecting just the extracurricular activities. And I asked the question in such a way, then, are you for drug testing at all? Oh, yes, but we think that we should just do the whole student population. So I told them I would pass that along, and that is really the only feedback I've had. I haven't heard anything negative at all. It's all been very positive, but wanted us to consider including the whole student population.
And we heard that the night of the parent forum, And I think our committee would like that, and administration would. But Beth Bird did a very nice job that evening explaining why it can't be the whole student body. And so we probably need to make sure, if as we continue to move forward in our communication, that we have that. We do have it posted on our web, on our FAQ sheet, the why part. But we'll make sure that we continue to put that out there. Absolutely.
I remember we can't do all of them, but there are the extracurricular activities that here are listed are ones that the drugs interaction could be detrimental to another team player, or, I mean, it could be hazardous to them. But we also have other clubs that would not fit in this category that are still extracurricular that I feel, because of our reasoning for doing this, to give the students an out to do it and to make it, that I'm not sure we shouldn't include. I mean, I'm using DECA as an example, and DECA's not something that's going to be physical and you're going to harm somebody else, but it is an extracurricular, and that is a privilege.
True, absolutely. And I think CTE will review those, but it is in law, legislative court cases, the extracurricular activity cannot be tied to a grade. So if DECA is a part of their extracurricular, they receive points, or it's part of their grade, or FFA, there's a piece of that that's tied to class participation or grade, then you cannot random drug screen students. They can't be in the pool.
Not the group, but the students themselves. Obviously, we're already doing that when they go out on their internships and so on. So that is included because some of the employers demand
Recommend. Mm-hmm. True. But FBLA, DECA, Latin Club, Spanish Club, there were lots of different, and we definitely talked about those and addressed them and would like to, but if there's a tie to the grade, then we can't. And that's one of the reasons why marching band can be included in the random pool, because marching band's not tied to a grade. And then there's a choir that is. There's the show choir that performs and competes outside also, but it's taken. Mm-hmm.
Is that our curriculum that puts it as part of that grade, or is that a state thing, Chad?
Test 1 2. The way those work, some of our extracurricular activities have been put on what we call a zero period. For example, marching band up until next year was put on a zero period, and that spans back years ago when maybe marching band was not taken as seriously as it should have been, and the only way that you could make a lot of requirements, especially of marching band, is to kind of offer it as a class on a zero period and be able to give it for a grade. So they started that, offering that as a class on a zero period for a grade, and they can put stipulations, and we do not have that issue anymore. Our kids are very passionate about marching band, so it is off of a zero period. And so there are still a few classes on zero period, and yes, that is part of site-based. And we take everything through curriculum committee early in the fall, and then it's all presented to site-based, and we discuss that at site-based as to where to take that off or not.
That's the way it's set up now, but these could be changes in the future
Based on
yes, all you have to do.
Yes, it changes every single
to where
year.
you would not be going against the law to be able to test for this.
And I don't know the numbers right off the top of my head, but if you're looking at sheer numbers, and I don't know why I've got this written, I want to say between everything we've got listed, and this does include duplicates. If you say if you play
Two
baseball
sports.
and basketball and you drive, this could be triplicates. And I want to say this is what this number, but just right off the cuff, this would include 1,323 entries. Now, that includes doubles and triplicates. So in reality, you can probably cut that in half. I'm going to say probably, I hate to even quote the number, I'm going to say 500.
Or even to 1,000.
Yeah,
You'd have
so
half the student
you know,
population.
the more you include, the more it's going to include, you know, but there is also the opt-in piece that I think is the most valuable for all of our parents. And I think you will see, this is Chad Thompson think, as a parent, I always put myself in terms of the parent. If I'm going to be a parent and I've got a student in that school and I have the option, the first thing I'm going to do is like, well, can you just randomly, purposefully draw him every single month? Because that you know, I'm thinking as a parent that takes pressure off me as a parent too, and gives my child that excuse. I think Mr. Rush and maybe Mr. Boston brought that up. That gives me an easy out of peer pressure every single time, because I know if I worked for Mr. Waller, and I would assume that automatically I'm going to be going to a pool or whatever once a month, because I would assume with the safety issues there, you have probably a pretty strong drug screening. And if I worked for him and I was out with some of my friends, I'd be like, no, I don't want to lose my job. So it gives our students, and I think the opt-in will be very popular with our students.
Mr. Mike, you got any questions?
Yes, I do. Am I limited? Okay.
I'm not going to catch you to 3 minutes.
I have several questions. First and foremost, I want to say I'm supportive of this, and I want to see it implemented. I do have some questions with regards to several items. One is that I think based on statistics, we know anywhere from the 6th grade all up to high school, depending on where you live and what you're doing, that there's anywhere from 12 to 40-some% of students dealing with or trying or experimenting with some illegal drug. My first question would be, what kind of minimum results are we looking for? Are we looking for traces, or are we looking for standards with regards to the testing criteria?
It would be a standard level from a lab. The lab will create those
Various
cut
levels.
points.
I mean, they can test to traces. NCAA uses a standard of so many nanograms with regards to
Sure.
various types of drugs. Is that something that we're going to develop before we go out for the quote request, or are we just? I mean, that point is important
Sure.
in my opinion, because there are some things that can show as a trace, and then
A false
yes,
positive.
you got a false positive. So I'm really curious about that. And the NCAA has a real strict program that deals with certain levels. And I think if we're going to implement this related to extracurricular and so forth, that we might want to look at their testing levels.
We definitely will, and as you say that, it'll be interesting to see, because we randomly drug screen employees now. What are our cut points there? And then at times, if we have reasonable suspicion of any student, there are times that we may have to go through that protocol, and what do those cut points look like also, because we actually use 2 different entities, so we'll continue to research that.
And most random drug screening in industries and whatever uses the Department of Transportation, which has a certain cutoff level.
Sure.
So that's item 1, and I didn't see that in the policy. And I'm not limited now, am I?
No, you're
keep
fine. Go
asking.
ahead.
Okay.
No, you're good.
With regards to 10 tests a week at the high school, you know, we're talking about 350, 400 tests on an annual basis. Are we going to have somebody assigned as case administrators, or, for instance, here again, we have compliance officers dealing at the college level that deals with these things to maintain anonymity, as well as, just as you said, my son was picked four times for a test. I mean, I got tested 3 times at work within the first year, but that's neither here nor there. It's just what happens. But, I mean, is there going to be a compliance officer or a case administrator, or is that going to be dealt with normal administration?
Our assumption that what we want in the RFP is the outside agency would manage all of that. And just for example, one of the entities that came in and talked to us talked about how they had a portal on the computer, and as kids got drawn, it was all by numbers, not by name, and so it was completely managed by their system. The only piece that the high school or the middle schools would have to manage would be the phone call to the parent to just initially tell the parent that they had been chosen to be screened. But we would love the management
Part of the
system.
management system is the outside
We want that
resources.
in the RFP.
You may have touched on this a minute ago when you were dealing with that a student may be an athlete, extracurricular activities other than athletics, driving. If they fail a test, then that means all privileges, whether they're an athlete, driving, or whatever, that's cut right there. Okay.
In the first offense, it's a 4-week, 28-day,
Yeah, I saw. I
Time
read
out.
that. That's-
but it says of contests, meaning you can still hang out with the team, be a part of the team, work with the team, and the coaches ask that because the coaches still want to help coach them successfully to make good choices. They want to not just completely let them go for the first offense like that. So I thought that was a pretty incredible when I heard coaches speak up and still want to, so they can practice, they can condition, but they cannot participate in contests during those weeks.
If I understand this correctly, then we'll have an outside resource person at each middle school and each high school, if we implement this, that would be dealing with these testings and so forth as an administrator and administration of this on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis.
Talk to me more about that, Mike.
Clarify that.
Yeah, to
That-
clarify
that's
that a
what
little
I'm-
bit.
Well-
We'll designate it internally. For example, Jeff Corsi, the AD, will be the primary person that the outside agency will work with.
Okay, well, that was part of my first question, and who would be
Won't
administering?
hire new people at our
No.
schools. We'll give those jobs to our ADs to coordinate with the outside agency.
It's like at the high school, it would be Jeff Corsi, myself, and Mr. Martin. Those will be the three administrators or athletic directors in that, to where we would be the one making the contact. Nobody else would be in there. So it helps eliminate who knows what, and we would have that.
Almost 400 cases on an annual basis.
That's why there's three of us, because if one of us is not available, there's three that can help
Okay.
manage that.
Okay, again, I'm in support, I'm supportive of this, really am. I just think that we need some specifics on the testing levels and who's going to be administrator at the facilities. That's it. Thank you.
Now, I have another question, if you don't mind. Something Mike said made me double think, something I assumed from reading the policy. If a student is drawn and he or she is a basketball player and they test positive, is their driving privilege also taken away? Okay.
Yes.
I missed that. Thank you.
Whatever they're involved in at that point, whether it be, let's say they're a basketball player, it's and band and whatever it is, whatever privilege they are participating in, it's 4 weeks. Correct.
You could actually also go to the flip side and be a football player and you're drawn out in January, February.
Yep.
It's your off season. Your 4 weeks still start the day that you had your random screen.
You don't hold that over till July after the dead period when they start, or in August. It starts from whatever time that it is determined to be a true positive.
That football player would not be allowed to drive for 4 weeks.
Correct.
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 Now, you just raised another question, because it says in here the testing will be done when school is in session. However, we have a lot of sports that are tied to our schools that go on when school is not in session. You have summertime, how does that work?
Won't test in June, July.
Okay.
August 1 will start all the way.
Okay. And I agree with Mike about the levels, because I think that's going to what levels we're testing for is going to have a lot to do with the price per each test. I'm guessing.
Yes, it will.
That's what I thought. Okay. I'm totally behind the.
Put in the tests and add whether it's 5 pounds, 6 pounds, 12 pounds plus synthetic. All those prices.
I'm fine with putting this on an agenda. I don't see any major changes to it. I mean, I hear Chad and the other principals supporting one of these days moving this forward to other activities, just because we're giving this as a tool to them. It is going to take us a while to get an RFP and figure out exactly how we're going to do it, but I think once we put the policy in place, then we can move forward with that.
I think that's what our goal is to put together now, if we hear that there's support, we didn't want to go much farther if there wasn't, is to put together an RFP to be able to present to you all on the 20th, and then ask for a formal first reading with the policy. Still knowing it has to have a second reading, and that there can be changes in between there at any time. So,
I don't have a problem with that. Dr. Sugg, you okay
I
with
think
that?
it's important, since we have heard, I'm speaking for myself now, because I have heard, I don't know if you all have, but I've heard, from the community members that they would rather look at the whole student body. I think it's important that we have that information ready at the board meeting so that that can be addressed and we can communicate that as to why we may or may not choose to go that route.
Can't choose to do it that way, yeah. No, it's illegal, yeah, it has to do with that. Mr. Mike, are you okay with putting that on the agenda for next time?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Are you okay? That's quite all right, I caught you. Are you okay with putting this onto the agenda next time to get an RFP and a first reading for a regular meeting? Or do you want some answers first?
I'm not in objection to a first reading as long as I understand that we're going to make additions to the policy to include some kind of reference to minimum test requirements to indicate positive.
and in the draft, we just put urine or saliva, because we won't really know till we get the RFP and all that also.
That gives us the option,
Absolutely.
yes.
No draft.
Okay, well, if you could make the changes that Mike has suggested into the policy, then I feel okay with putting it on the agenda for a first reading. And if there's changes, you can always make those changes before that second reading, so. Okay. Thank you, ladies and gents. Moving on to update on LPC process, Mr. Steve?
Yes, ma'am. We've had our first meeting, and at that first meeting, we elected a chair and a vice chair, and I was elected the chair of that committee. Butch Canty is our KSBA facilitator, and he'll be working with us throughout the whole process. That first meeting was about a 45-minute video on the training of the LPC members and role of the architect and a few other things that we talked about that night. Our vice chair, I think I forgot to mention, is Mr. Keegan O'Daniel. He was elected as vice chair that evening. Our next meeting is March the 8th, which is this Wednesday. Prior to having that meeting, well, let me kind of preface it this way. The things that we'll talk about at that meeting are financials and bonding potential. And then also we have a KDE orientation demographic meeting as well. So we'll have just a little bit more of their information they need to share. With that being said, part of the agenda is financial and bonding potential. Joe Nance is coming down, and so Miss Lisa and Mr. Mike being part of that group at 3:45 on the 8th. Joe is coming down to kind of talk to the district about where we stand and what our financial and bonding capabilities are. So he'll be sharing that with us a little bit before the meeting. Then we'll have our 5:30 meeting, 5:30 to 7 meeting, and we'll be talking about those additional things as well. So that's kind of where we're at in the process. Butch is our KSBA person, and he's working with us all the way through. We're making good progress. Matter of fact, we kind of snuck this one in. I shouldn't say snuck this one in. That doesn't sound right. He's been in Florida on vacation, and I found out that he was coming back to Kentucky. And so I asked him if we could go ahead and have another meeting while he was back. Then that would be ideal. We didn't sneak it in, meaning I put all the information in the paper and all that kind of stuff. That's not an issue. So just kind of want to give you that update. One of the other things that we'll be working on and working towards is the fact that South Heights is listed as a transitional school, and we need to get them back to a permanent school status so that we can use some of our facilities monies to be able to make some improvements, renovations, and those kind of things within the school. So we'll be working towards that, and that'll keep us on our 8 elementaries and kind of continue on. They were moved from permanent status to transitional due to the differences and that we needed to make with Spotsville. So to kind of move them back, if you guys are okay with, what we'll move towards is getting them back on a permanent status so that we can do renovations and things at that school. There's one exception, and Billy and them took care of it last year with an emergency. If you're on a transitional, or if you're listed as transitional, if there is an emergency situation, they can do renovation work, which is the example that South Heights had last summer with our chiller issue, and we replaced that. So those are the only type things we can do unless they're listed as a permanent status. So we'll kind of move towards that if you guys are okay with that, and as we move around.
I have a question. Is Jefferson listed as a transitional school?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
At this point, we have 3 transitionals, Spotsville, Jefferson, and South Heights. So,
Okay. Any questions, board members of the LPC? Mr. Mike, you're on that list too?
I'm going to this next meeting.
yes, ma'am.
I want y'all to know.
Glad you're up on it.
I was glad I skipped the first one. I've seen that film about 4 times.
Thank you. We appreciate you being on.
New actors in there or anything. Not at all.
Thank you, Mr. Steve. We appreciate that. Okay, update on bullying in secondary schools. Principals?
I'll do a little intro while they're getting together. You all have been gracious to help us in bullying prevention through the last several years, and you sponsored some challenge day activities, and you sponsored Dr. Malcolm Smith. Joe scheduled Dr. Smith to come and talk with students and have a parent meeting, and it is something that we work diligently every day through our policies, through our procedures, through just interaction with kids. And I thought the work session might be a good way to just give you a little update on preventive bullying strategies, programs that are going on in our secondary schools. So they each are going to take just a few minutes, and if they have any handouts, they'll be welcome to pass those out. Mr. Thompson, I'll let you start.
I'll go ahead and start. What I've put together for you, just went down and just pretty simple, just a bulleted or a numbered list of things that we do to help combat bullying at the high school. And you'll see everything from assemblies to small groups to school-wide programs and projects to things that we put in PLT, all the way to the bullying and harassment forms that we use, to worst-case scenario that we have involvement of our SRO in the court system. So we kind of span the gamut from small individual groups to large groups to school-wide things to paperwork to SRO. We have a lot going on in the building each and every day, and trying to resolve any issues that come up. And a lot of our issues do not take place in the building. They're a result of outside influences that happen over a weekend or happen at night. And I get the call at 7:30 in the morning, and being who I am, I'm not going to sit there and say, well, that happened last night. That's not my issue to deal with, when my first job is to, number one, make sure provide safety and security for everybody in my building, but also is customer service to our parents. And I also know that a lot of our parents may not have the best option to help them deal with their own child. So I do everything within my ability. I don't care if it happened in my building or not. I coach them on what to do outside of the building, but also when you call me, I'm going to deal with it inside the building, whether I had anything to do with it or not. It could be from sitting down and having a meeting with 2 of them. It could be, had one 2 weeks ago, had nothing to do with the school, but offered our services, got a police officer in, took care of paperwork and all that. So we offer anything and everything and are willing to do anything and everything we can do, whether it happens on our property or off our property.
That's both admirable and proactive, because eventually it's going to spill over into the school anyway.
Correct. Correct.
Wanted to make 3 points in how we address bullying. Number 1 is how we educate. I'm wearing a bracelet that says choose kind. We do a book study every summer, and just about all of our book studies focused on that empathy, anti-bullying piece. We also educate by having an assembly where we're just focused on the bullying, and we teach them. We have a system that we teach. It's called Stop, Walk, and Talk, and then there's also a bystander piece. I don't want to get into the details of that, but all of our students, we give a very common language on how they're going to take up for themselves in a civil manner and those kind of things. Point number 2 is how we address it. We address everything. Our folks are trained that anything that is brought our way, we take it serious. Because if it's serious to the kid, it's serious. And we never say, just tough it out, hang in there, kids will be kids. We don't do that. We dig in with the parents, and so we address it very heavily. And the third piece would be how we recognize kids. We try to build champions and the kids who stand up for one another, and we reward and recognize them. So I feel really good about our plan of attack. I think that my opinion is that some of these parents, I wish that they would be as aggressive on coming in and working with us as they get very aggressive on Facebook and social media, and not very aggressive on bringing it to us. A lot of times we find out about it the first thing we hear of it is the parent spilling everything on Facebook, and then we look into it. But we just wish that they would bring that to us as aggressively as they bring it to social media. But I'm very confident in how we address it, and so we know it's a serious issue. So.
One of the most important thing I've done in my school is once a month I get with my staff and I assess my staff. Is bullying an issue? What's going on this month? Is it an issue? What type of bullying is going on? Where are the hot spots? Where can we look for bullying in our school? And then how can we prevent it? And one of the biggest things from the last meeting we had on Thursday, cyberbullying is just running rampage. It's that, the Instagram, the Facebook, and it's, as Chad said, it's seeping into the school, and we handle it. We don't say it's outside. So we try to help and be proactive about the cyberbullying, and also getting our SRO involved and doing what we can to stop all the cyberbullying going on. So I have a PBIS sheet, and it looks at my from last year, from August to February 28th, and this year. And if you look at the bullying, how drastically it's gone down. So I think we've been really attacking it hard. And one thing I know that I can't do it alone. I've got to have my staff involved. I've got to have the community involved. I've got to have the students involved. So the way the students are involved, they make the classroom rules. They sign contracts. I teach them to be not to be bystanders, but we call it upstanders. Just don't stand there. If you see somebody getting bullied, say something. The way that parents get involved, always had an open door policy when it comes to bullying. So I make it a point to call parents if the kid has bullied or is being bullied. And as Morgana says, she told me when I first became a principal, make sure you call every parent before the sun goes down. So I make that a point to do that. And community-wise, one of the last literacy nights that we had, I had Tammy Sutton from Lighthouse come in to talk to the staff, the students, the parents, about different ways you can help yourself and others against bullying. So that's what we're doing at Central.
The orange folder is North's folder. In an effort to be completely transparent, we believe in, first of all, working to make sure that our teachers and all of our staff were on the same page. It was something that we started out the year talking about. And right inside the orange folder, you'll see a sheet that says, what are we doing to address bullying in 2016-17? And you'll see a long list of things, starting with Bodfin life skills, which some of our science teachers participated in. We took a group of educators to the Jostens rally, which is all about school culture, increasing the amount of recognition that we give to kids for lots of reasons, both academic, behaviorally, just about anything you can imagine, we work to recognize them for. Everything from, did you do your AR? Did you exceed your AR? Then we have done multiple different ones of us have done professional development. We are participating this year in Justin's The Harbor, which will have an episode. They're usually about 4 to 5 minutes long, and that's part of our advisory lessons. The very last handout that you'll see in your folder are all of our advisory lessons for the year. We used everything from bully.org to different resources that, since I had been at the district, I'd researched this a lot since it was under one of the things that I was kind of in charge of. And so we used a lot of the resources that I researched when I was at the district level, and we have used those. So these are lessons, and typically, I mean, what I've done is I've printed out for you every lesson that we have planned for this school year so far, either whether it was using the Harbor or whether it was using bully.org. These are all planned with a clear learning target. Everything that the teacher needs, it's a click away, so they can literally log on and work through it. Most of them, at the beginning of the year, all the lessons were about 30 minutes apiece. And then as we kind of kick into the year and RTI gets running full-fledged, it averages out to be about 12 minutes a day, and so sometimes it takes them 1 or 2 days to get through a lesson. But they're always way more lessons than they will ever get through in the course of the year. The Harbor is something that we have fallen in love with through Jostens Renaissance, Jostens Learning, because the sponsor, the person that does the talks with the kids, doesn't look like any of us sitting here at the table. He's got really long hair and he's tattooed, and the kids can relate to him. His name is Mike Smith, and he actually started a foundation. Also, like, part of the things that the kids watch at the very beginning to learn who he is, he's a famous skateboarder. Most of us at this table wouldn't know that, but the kids really, truly fall in love with him because the girls think he's just so hot, as in whatever it is, HAUTE or whatever. But the boys can relate to him because some common interest. But regardless, the kids can relate to him. And as I said, he started foundations to help lots and lots of ways in different schools. One of the things that he likes to tell the story of is the fact that his senior year of high school, he started relating to a young special needs boy. And he goes on through, after you've watched many episodes, you learn that he actually, when he got out of high school, he adopted this young man. It was somebody he had just sort of not paid much attention to. In his senior year, through a conversation in the hallway, he reached out to him, and he ended up, now that he is a grown man and married, he adopted this young man, and this young man lives in his home. And so a lot of what he talks about is truly about reaching out and setting good examples. And so he brings in all of these different famous people to do these little, anywhere from 2 to 5 minute clips, and then they have critical thinking questions. They don't take very long. You can even do role plays off of them. I put an example of one if you'd like to see, just like 2 or 3 minutes of a clip, I'd be happy to show it to you. The third page in there is one of the things from the harbor. It's an episode called The Judgment, and it's about how we as people sit back and judge people. He gives an example in the little video called The Judgment, where he gets judged because he has long hair and he has tattoos. And so he talks about we all do that. And so there's just a little list of questions. It doesn't take them very long, but you would be surprised what you can get out of kids in just a few minutes of kind of getting real with the conversation. So we've also had multiple speakers come in. We had Matt Hart. We worked with our family resource and had Matt Hart come in with his program called React to Bullying. We had Mark Marrow. We worked with the district on the Malcolm Smith piece. So those are some of the things. Like I said, it's a constant thing in our advisory lessons. We've also been doing some small group girl counseling because some of our girls are the biggest bullies in the world, in the way of they're terrible and very judgmental. And so some of our ones that we've identified, we wanted to put them through some small group counseling and just to help them see that it's more important for them to spend time building each other up and supporting each other than saying nasty, mean things about each other. We have social groups that are going on. 2 weeks ago, we started Kindness Week, and so the kids are submitting kind things that other people have done, and they're on display during cafeteria time. The kids have been submitting them. We have a student aide that puts those adds them to our PowerPoint, and it just continually scrolls to show some of the good things that kids are doing for each other. So that's pretty much, and if anybody's interested in watching a minute or two of Mike Smith, just so you can kind of see. I know the high school, Chad, are y'all using some of those?
We use about every week. We have a piece in there. Every single week, we just watch one day.
Very, and he just gets very famous people to come in and do these very short little clips of just things that they've gone through, just to kind of show that they are truly human beings that have gone through similar things and just trying to get kids to see it through different eyes. So can you go ahead and show that? The one that I queued up is called Tolerance, but literally they have multiple ones. There are 3 seasons of it now. And it's just on just about any topic that you can imagine that would relate to kids. Everything from cyberbullying to picking on people to setting goals. One of the ones that I'm going to use for my testing talks this year is all about finishing.
We all know how it feels to be judged, whether it's at school, it's at work, it's at home, because of the clothes that we wear, the sports that we play, the music that we listen to, the things that we like to do, the group of friends that we hang out with. Maybe it's the mistakes that we made. We all know what it feels like to be judged. I get thousands and thousands of emails, messages, comments, posts from students all across the country talking to me about how it feels to be not accepted by one group or not a part of another group, that their school is plagued by cliques and people judging other people. It's like you walk into the lunchroom and you know exactly where you can sit and where you can't sit, and everybody's got their little place. You know what's crazy to me? That over 42% of all students say that they've been bullied online. 3 million students nationally are absent every single month from school because they don't feel safe. Every day in our country, there's an average of over 5,000 students who have attempted suicide, and that's just grades 7 through 12. Where do these numbers stem from? I think it comes from the way that we judge each other. Judgment isn't just a high school problem. The way that we judge each other, it's a society problem. If you don't believe me, just look at social media. Look at the things that people write about each other on Facebook, the comments on Instagram. It's the things that people tweet at celebrities. I mean, have you ever read the comments on a YouTube video? The world, it's more connected than ever. But bullying, cliques, prejudice, those things run rampant in our schools across the country. A lot of the reason judgment exists is because of the differences in how we value each other. You know, we hold someone as more valuable because they play sports or because they get straight A's. Or you judge somebody because of, the neighborhood that they come from or the money that their parents make. Or we judge someone because of the music that they listen to or the color of their skin, their ethnic background, or their sexual preference. And you know the way you kids hate how adults judge you? It's the way that they look at you for being different, for being young, for being unique. It's the same look. It's the same exact thing that you do to each other every single day. If you're the kind of person who judges someone, all it is a pathetic little habit that starts when you're a kid, and by the time you're an adult, you can't change because it's so rooted in who you are. It's like there's this totem pole that we base people on. Like there's this top and this middle and this bottom, and we base people based upon our own value system. And wherever you're at on the totem pole, that's how you treat people. I mean, I've been on all sides of it. I remember walking into high school as a new student with purple hair and a Green Day t-shirt on. And then I became a 4-sport varsity athlete, and I thought I was more important than everyone else just because I played sports. I thought judgment would end after high school, but it doesn't. I mean, it continues on into the adult world. There's nothing that cracks me up more than when I walk into a room filled with adults and I watch them judge me for what I look like. I mean, judgment, it's something that you're going to face for the rest of your life. And you can sit there and pretend it's not you. You can pretend that you haven't been bit by this poison. You can pretend that you don't have this little totem pole for the way that you evaluate people and the way that you judge people. But you have to realize something. All of us, we all have our own prejudices. We all make our own judgments. We have to understand that everyone has value. Everyone matters. I mean, if you're cutting yourself because you don't feel like you belong at school, you do. You matter. If you don't want to show up every morning because you feel like nobody hears you and nobody cares about you, if you're watching this and you feel like a ghost, you have to understand something. Every one of us matters. We all matter. But if each of us can understand that we've all got value, that we all matter, that's when we begin to change the culture of our schools.
So that's one episode, and you have the set of questions that actually go with that. The only other part of it that we did is you know what you do what you learn. So a lot of the things that we did at South, I picked those right up and moved them into where I was. And the only thing that I would say is that I spent a large part of my day doing little pink papers. Little pink papers. Literally, the stack is about like this now. And it's every single time a kid comes to the office, they get a little pink paper. If I'm not in my office and available, they get a little pink paper. And I'll spend a couple of days a week or part of that day pulling those little pink papers out and meeting with the kids. And it could be anything from, let me give you for instance, the other day a little boy came, and I wasn't in the office, I was out in a meeting, and he wanted me to know that someone had looked over the stall at him in the restroom, and he wanted me to know that that had happened, and he was upset about it. So he had put that on his little pink paper, so I pulled him in, met with him. He didn't know who the child was. He could tell me what time of day, and so just kind of talking him through that. But I spend loads of time every day doing those little pink papers that are just, you know, some of them are big things that happen. Some of them are not so big things that happen, but we work to take them all serious because for that kid at that moment, he was very disturbed that someone had done that to him, and he needed somebody to know. He wanted, he wanted guidance or myself. I stole from Ryan the whole part of we teach them. Like I met with them at the beginning of the year, and they hear me say repeatedly throughout the year, go back and report to the same person. Because when I was at South, we figured out that kids would report it to the counselor, and then they'd report it to the other counselor, and then they'd report it to the assistant principal, and then they'd report it to the principal, and they may have reported it 10 times, but they had never reported the same person. So that's why I get so many pink papers, because once I've started working on something, once they feel comfortable that they can come tell me, I end up with loads of little pink papers. Mr. Eastham has his own little system that he does, and our counselors have their own little system, but we worked for the kids to, once we started working on a bullying issue with a kid, we want them to keep going back to that same person. And then if guidance, if it's a situation where it then needs to go to as a discipline referral, then they will make that referral and let us know for us to handle it. But so those are some of the things that we are doing to work on bullying.
Heard a lot of good things. I think there's no one silver bullet that's going to fix this whole problem. And I think the bullets change depending on what age it is. So what works in your school and Ryan's school is not going to be the same as at Chad's. But you all are at least piggybacking off of each other and helping each other to get through this. And the same instances are not going to be the same at South as they are at North, because you have totally different sets of kids, different backgrounds, different. But I see that you all are trying, and I'm glad to hear the claiming of those children and the claiming of those issues. So, thank you. I applaud your effort. Anything else, board members? Thank you.
I would just add that, everything Lisa said, ditto too. And the other piece, I'm glad to hear on the video, and I think you all are addressing this, that bullying doesn't just end. It doesn't begin in school and end in school. And some of the same adults that I hear and I read on Facebook and I hear out in the community sometimes are bullying other adults. And I think we've all seen that in our workplaces. And so we just need to remind the students that this is not just a student problem, as he said, it's a societal problem. And you're giving them tools to take into adulthood.
Talk a lot about the fact that it's very easy for us to sit behind a computer or a phone and type something that we would never say to someone's face. If I had a nickel for every time I've said that to a kid this year, it's very easy to sit behind your phone and call them those names, but you don't do that to their, so just teaching them that's just because it's easy to do doesn't make it acceptable.
Well, and Ms. Morgana and I have talked too about, there's a thing that the community uses, the adults use, a victim's thing, that the victim and the accused and the accuser have to meet face to face, and they have to talk it out about why this happened and why you did this. And they said it's a very powerful tool to put those people face to face and make them understand how it's going to affect the rest of their lives. So, anyway, thank you all. We appreciate that. Moving on to a brighter subject, legislative updates, Ms. Morgana.
Hey, legislative update. And I just wanted to share with staff members, there are some who I know want to travel to the boys' game. And so secondary folks, we appreciate you taking time presenting. And if you need to leave at this point, completely understand. I think, no, you're not going? Okay. Well, you're more than welcome to. Okay. Yes, legislative update. The best update I can give you is it changes daily. So information I will just briefly share tonight could be considerably different by the end of the day tomorrow. This is a capital link that we receive through the Kentucky Association of School Superintendents. It's very similar to information that KSBA sends out. And so some of you may have already seen very similar information. House Bill 520 is probably the most talked about bill at this point, and that is charter school. It did take a little longer to get through the House than anticipated because of the pushback and the feedback that came from educators across the state. So positive things about House Bill 520 right now is that they did remove the clause about virtual schools, that would not be an acceptable charter school. The provision that a student could enroll from anywhere in the state has been taken out, and the transportation requirement is currently gone, meaning where a public school does not have to transport students that attend a charter school. Concerns that we need to make sure that our senators are aware of. It is completely past the House, and now it goes into the Senate Committee, Education Committee, and if the Senate Education Committee approves it, it will go to full Senate floor for vote. Right now, the appeals process, it says throughout the language, throughout the bill, it talks about how it's local board control, that a charter school would apply to a local board. That is true, but the appeals process then goes on to an appointed board in Frankfort for review. So words that Kentucky School Board Association uses, that it's a little bit illusionary, really, who has the power, even though it says local board approval, then appeals go straight to an appointed board in Frankfort. So that's still a concern. Funding is definitely a concern because transferring students out of a school district, there is question about, is that constitutionally acceptable? Can you literally take tax dollars local tax dollars, not money you receive from the state, but local tax dollar money, and send it to another county. And so that's a huge concern. And the last one is, there's two more. The open enrollment, meaning that there's not a lottery. So it's open enrollment, meaning the charter board school could pick and choose who comes to a charter school. It's open enrollment. And the last one is the personnel issues. Those have not really been honed in according to Kentucky School Board Association, meaning do they pay into retirement system? Do they not pay into retirement system? Who pays insurance? Is the local board responsible for evaluations? Does the charter school board have to do that? There is language in here currently that says charter school employees will receive tenure after 2 years, but we operate after 4 years. And so how does that work together, and who fills out the lead report? Our HR department does for our employees. Who has to do that? So personnel is still a big concern that we're encouraged to make sure we talk to our senators about. They have 5 or 6 days left for this session, and they anticipate that it will either be heard tomorrow or Wednesday on the Senate floor. So
They took the section out to where the money couldn't be transferred to another county, another district, and they took the part out that we would not be responsible for busing. But if there's a charter school that is set up inside of our own county, that money would still be taken out of our district and sent to that charter school. Is that correct?
could be, yes.
Could be, because they didn't,
Yes.
they talked about the funding, but they didn't remove all of the funding.
Oh, no,
money.
no. If it's within the county lines, it's still very fair game.
So the money could go to another school district that we may have authorized or not authorized, but we have no control over.
The first line comes to the local board, and the local board chooses to accept the charter school or not to accept the charter school. If you all choose not to accept it, then it is appealed to a board in Frankfurt, an
But she said
appointed
in
board.
2 months could be, they could make us do it anyway. So
Correct.
that's only going to hold them off for 2 months. But the money would still go with that student
Correct.
to another school.
So we're obviously continuing to watch that. And updates on just a few other bills. There are actually several as you skim through this. Everything that's highlighted is something that would definitely have an impact on Henderson County, on local school districts. Senate Bill 1, which is the accountability bill, was passed in the Senate, and now it's sitting in the House, and they feel like they will hear that this week. The school calendar, Senate Bill 50, same thing. Senate has passed it. They'll hear it in the House this week. The neighborhood schools, you have probably seen that. That's been in the media quite a bit about neighborhood schools where a parent or a student could request to attend the school that is closest to them. That would affect Henderson County schools. Sometimes you think neighborhood schools and it makes you think of big cities like Louisville and Lexington, and they're getting a lot of coverage in the media about the whole legislative session. But that would affect us. It truly would. There are sections of Spotsville that are right up by Pebble Creek that are right now go to Bengate. That would fluctuate. Cairo has some up on Madisonville Road. Chandler would have some up. Niagara would have some closer to East. So that's a significant bill. We'll see what leverage it gets this week. House Bill 454, the Essential Skills Curriculum, that would affect us financially because the way it's worded now, my understanding is that it is a curriculum that would need to be purchased and administered or taught to kids, to children. There is a bill to bring back cursive writing in the 3rd grade. There is a bill that speaks to religion and Bible classes offered as an elective. And then there are 2 other bills that talk about teaching financial literacy at the high school level and passing a civics test to be able to graduate. None of those are optional other than the religion and Bible class being an elective offering. everything else the way it's written currently, it would be something we would be required to implement. And so there's several others in there. They expect to really hear and make a ruling on all of those this week. So I just share with you to stay tuned. We're watching it, and obviously, regardless of how the legislative session ends, I know that we'll work, our administrative staff and the board will work collectively together to provide the best educational opportunities we can for our students in Henderson. But I do see us having to have some conversations down the road if the charter bill passes, because that will be a significant difference for us.
Somebody's going to have to challenge that, whether it be one school district or a multitude. Thank you.
I agree, Mr. Waller.
And watching Facebook and social media today, there were people in our community that were commenting about federal bills that have been put before Congress regarding the same thing as what House Bill 520 is doing in Kentucky. And the people that I saw commenting was all like, we need to get a hold of our national senators. We need to get a hold of our national congressmen. And my comment back to them was, excuse me, but Kentucky has already got one piece of this passed, and it's going to come to fruition quicker in Kentucky than it will on a federal level. So if you want to get involved, this week is the time to contact your senators here in Kentucky. But they're just now realizing, oh, this could happen on a national level, and it's like, you're going to be behind.
And I will say our local legislators have listened to the educators. Dorsey Ridley has been very supportive of public education, and Robbie Mills voted no on House Bill 520 as well, and I feel like that was a great effort on his part in listening to local educators and the constituents that he represents. So,
Thank you. Like you said, it changes every day. April work session date, Ms. Morgana?
there's been a request for us to cancel, go ahead of time and to cancel the April work session. As far as the LPC process, I don't think that we will be far enough along to need to have 2 meetings in April to get that to the State Department by the April 21st deadline, because Butch Canny's going back out of town for a whole nother month, and he's our KSB facilitator. So I don't feel like right now that there is particular work information, and so it was requested to be put on the agenda, and so I just want to share with you from the administrative point of view, I think we could live without an April 1st meeting. Just to give you a bit of information before the board decides, on May 1st, there's a work session scheduled, and Commissioner Pruitt is coming to Henderson to have a town hall meeting that night. And so, not tonight because it's not on the agenda, but down the road I'll ask that we either change our time or our date if we feel like we need a work session, or just to invite our board to attend the meeting with Dr. Pruitt that night. He'll spend the evening with us doing a town hall meeting, and the next day he'll stay and tour the Career and Tech Center and Thelma B. Johnson. So we're pretty excited about that.
It's pretty cool. It's been several years since Commissioner has been here. I don't see a problem with getting rid of the April work session as long as we get far enough along on our drug testing procedures and our RFP that there doesn't need to be any tweaks to that. But I think if we're going to put that, you're going to get some answers to questions for Mike before we put that on there, and we can be able to put it out for an RFP. And if nothing else, we'll be waiting for a second reading during our regular April meeting, correct? Correct. That's your goal. That would be the only thing. Okay. Okay. I don't have a problem with that. Do we need to, that's set in our regular schedule, do we need a vote to take that off? We haven't passed, okay. So I'll look for a motion to remove the April work session from our regular scheduled meetings.
So moved.
I'll second that. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, Mr. Mike, you're up. April the 10th. is the one that we're getting rid of, correct?
Well, shoot fire, I'll make a motion to adjourn then.
Hey, thank you, man. I'll second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Anybody opposed? You've had it. Motion
Opposed on
carried.
that one.
Motion carried. Thank you all. Thank you all for your time.